now we'll talk just briefly about privately traded REITs. And they function in a similar way that publicly traded REITs do, in the sense that they're buying real estate, they're buying properties, they could be different types, but they're privately traded, meaning that if you want to sell your shares or buy shares, you have to buy them back from the company that's issuing them. Whereas publicly traded REITs trade on different stock exchanges, so anytime you want to buy or sell that, you can easily do it. However, with the privately traded REITs, you don't have that luxury.
Are you ready for a successful retirement? We're addressing the topics facing today's retirees. Welcome to Retire with Ryan. Now here's your host, Ryan Morrissey.
Welcome back. This week, we're going to talk about 6 ways that you can make money from real estate before and during retirement. And this is going to be the first of a 4-part series on real estate, each episode dealing with something different, but each focusing on real estate. And this week, we're talking again about 6 ways that you can make money from real estate. And I'm going to list these ways in their order of difficulty and sophistication that it requires for you to make money from real estate. So the first being investing in something known as a REIT, or a real estate investment trust. And real estate investment trusts are sold in 2 different varieties, one being publicly traded real estate investment trusts and the other being private real estate investment trusts. And we'll start first with public. With publicly traded real estate investment trusts, these are similar to buying a stock or a mutual fund, where they trade on major exchanges, the New York Stock Exchange, the NASDAQ, and by U.S. requirement, these funds have to pay out 90% of the profits and dividends that they earn, which make them ideal sometimes for investors in retirement because of the fact that they pay larger than normal dividends. And they then fall into a number of different sectors that these could be invested in. Some are office REITs, industrial REITs, retail REITs, lodging and resort REITs, residential REITs. Then they start getting a little more sophisticated: timberlands REITs, healthcare REITs, self-storage REITs, infrastructure REITs, data center REITs, diversified REITs, and specialty REITs. And all these REITs are going to buy an asset. They own office buildings, could be residential homes. And then the other type, which is really a separate one, is a mortgage REIT, where these REITs are actually lending the money to other investors that are buying buildings. So they're actually lenders and they don't own the actual buildings. Now they're collateralized, so in the event of a default, they would get money back, but they're lenders. So as an investor, you can buy these outright. You can just buy these individual companies that have this specific focus. Or you could buy a fund where the goal of that fund is either to buy a cross-section maybe of all of the REITs that are out there, or maybe it's an index fund where it's just trying to track the broad index. One of the largest ones is XLRE, which tracks the S&P 500 REITs, the ones that trade there. And there's even ones that are more diversified that invest in global REITs. So the point of this, however, is it's another asset class helping you to further diversify your portfolio. And if you listen to episode 17, the 5-step portfolio process, you know that they're one of the main asset classes that you can invest in. So as far as simplicity, this is a really easy way to get yourself exposure to real estate. If you use a diversified index fund, something like XLRE or another one, then it's very easy. The investment is diversified, and within those REITs, the individual REITs themselves are being managed. So you're not having to deal with tenants calling you that something broke or collecting rent from people. So those are definitely the pros. As far as the cons are that you're not getting a ton of leverage. You're definitely getting some leverage because, as you can imagine, these are not paid with cash. They're borrowing where they can, but there could be more leverage if you were doing the investing on your own. So you're making money from these in 2 ways. All of these real estate investment trusts pay some type of a dividend. Some dividends are lower than others, so you want to be careful anytime you're buying one with a high dividend. Sometimes that could be a signal that things are wrong. So that's one way you're making money, just like if you owned a rental property. And the second way you're making money is that if the actual REITs themselves go up in value, then that will increase the value of your investment. And generally, REITs do perform in line with the stock market. So if the stock market's going up, usually REITs will be going up. If the stock market's going down, usually they'll be going down. So they definitely do track the economy. Now, I mentioned earlier there were two types of REITs, and we talked about publicly traded REITs, but now we'll talk just briefly about privately traded REITs. And they function in a similar way that publicly traded REITs do, in the sense that they're buying real estate, they're buying properties, they could be different types, but they're privately traded, meaning that if you want to sell your shares or buy shares, you have to buy them back from the company that's issuing them. Whereas publicly traded REITs trade on different stock exchanges. So anytime you want to buy or sell that, you can easily do it. However, with the privately traded REITs, you don't have that luxury. So they're highly illiquid, meaning that your money will be tied up for a number of years. It could be anywhere from 4 years to 7, 8 years, maybe even longer, depending on how it does. And usually what will happen with these is they'll raise capital, they then will close the number of people that can buy it, and then it will sit for a while invested, and then there'll be some liquidation event where they'll either sell the fund to someone else or they'll create a public offering where then you can sell your shares. And those are the two ways that you can then get out of the fund. Prior to that, it's very difficult for you to get out of it. There's usually either no ability to redeem your shares, or there's only the ability to redeem like 10% of the shares per year. So if this isn't appealing to you, having this lack of liquidity, and you want access to your money, then you probably want to stick more with the publicly traded REITs. The main reason you'd want to maybe use one of these privately traded REITs is if you're trying to take advantage of something called a 1031 exchange, which is where you're selling a property that you've owned for a while, an investment property, and you have a large capital gain on the investment property. And rather than paying that large capital gain, you can buy another like property as defined by the IRS. And one of those like properties is actually by buying a real estate investment trust, where now you're not having to manage the property, you just collect the cash flow from the real estate investment trust, and you're no longer involved in the day-to-day operations of managing a property. In that case, you have to exchange your money if it's going into a privately traded REIT. So the second way to make money in real estate would be owning rental properties. And obviously this is just like it sounds. You go out and you buy a rental property. Maybe it's you end up moving to another house in retirement and you rent out the house that you're currently living in. That's something that sometimes people do. You also can buy other rental properties. And the difficulty with doing this is that anytime you're buying a property that's not your primary residence, you're going to need to put down at least 25 to 30%. So if you're buying a rental property, let's say that costs $300,000, that means you're going to need to put down, let's just make it easy, 30%, $90,000 plus closing costs. And that's where it can be difficult to acquire a lot of rental properties, but it can be done. And you have to look at these based on their projected cash flow and the cost that you're going to be spending on them. So the pros is that if you're looking for regular income and you don't want income that's tied to the stock market, then you can invest in rental properties. And you also have the ability to get more leverage maybe than you would through a real estate investment trust fund, because as I mentioned, you can borrow up to 70% of the acquisition costs of the property. And you also get tax deductions. And one thing that's always nice is to minimize your taxes wherever possible. And the way that it works with real estate is that when you buy a property, a rental property, you're able to write off 1/27th of the property and the land costs over the next 27 years. And what that means is that that's a deduction you take against rental income. So it's possible that you might not pay very much of any tax each year on the rental income that you're making. And over time, if you're paying down your mortgage with the rent that you're receiving, you're building up equity because your tenant is paying rent. And then after owning this property for 25 or 30 years, that's now mortgage free, hopefully, you can then continue to hold it and collect even more rent than before, because now you don't have the cost of paying the mortgage. You still have your taxes and insurance and any other maintenance costs, or you could choose to sell the property. And I mentioned a little bit about this earlier, and that's what we'll focus on a future episode, something called a 1031 exchange, because what actually happens when you sell your property after you've owned it for a long time, you have to recapture all of the write-offs that you've had through that depreciation. So as you can imagine, it really gives you a very large tax bill. The only ways to avoid that are either to you not sell the property, or you can transfer it to another like property through this 1031 exchange. So I started talking about some of the cons, obviously. It's tedious managing a property. Tenants can be difficult. And I might have mentioned this, I believe, in other podcasts. I've talked about how I own some rental properties that I've had for a number of years. At the current moment, I'm not looking to get any more because it's great when people are paying and things aren't breaking, but when people are not paying and things are breaking, it can be very problematic and very draining both mentally and physically. And obviously, if you have vacancies, then that can be an issue because now you don't have income coming in from the properties. This brings us to the third way to make money in real estate, and that would be renting out part of an existing home or a room in an existing home. Let's say that you have a lower level in your house, lower basement that's finished, and you don't use the basement. Well, maybe there's a way that you can lock off the basement and you can turn that into a rental property. Maybe you have an in-law apartment or in-law suite in your house that you're no longer using, or you could configure your house that you rented out part of it. This is another way an easy way to get into being a landlord. Now, you have to be careful, obviously, if you're going to be living with this person or people, making sure that you vet them properly through credit and background checks and setting some ground rules to make sure that you both are not going to be inconvenienced by living together. But it's another good way that you can get some additional income. And there's actually a show on HGTV that was on for a while called Income Property, where the host helped the homeowner to make renovations or update an existing apartment in their house or basement level so they could get rental income. And if you really wanted to go to the extreme, you could renovate your basement and you could turn that into your retirement quarters, and then you could rent out the top level of your house. And this could be great if maybe you're only going to spend part of the year in Connecticut and maybe spending the rest of the year somewhere else. You'll have that basement apartment to go back to. And in the meantime, someone's watching after your house and you're getting rental income from them. Option number 4 for making money in real estate would be getting into house flipping. And this is obviously, there's a number of shows that are about this, right? There's one that was taking place in Connecticut for a number of years where I'm located. There's one in Las Vegas, Boston, different states, all over the place. And obviously this is a lot more sophisticated, and these shows make it look very easy, right? It's always everything wraps up on time. Everything comes in as the cost they anticipated, and they almost always make a profit in this. Well, I think a lot of that probably is the magic of TV, as they say. I also have some experience in flipping houses. I flipped a number of houses. I haven't done it in a long time because it is very time consuming, and obviously you're not always guaranteed to make money. And really from my experience, where you make the money is when you buy the house. The better deal you get on the house, the better you're going to do, because you have an idea generally of what the costs of things are going to be and what you're going to sell the house for. So the less you can buy the house for, obviously that gives you more wiggle room for the unknowns. And I would say if you're going to do this, you definitely want to do some research as far as going to different websites, maybe signing up for a class, but be very careful because I have attended some of these workshops where you go for a couple days and then at the end of it, they want to sell you a mentorship program for like $25,000 or $35,000. They're probably even ones that cost more or less. And now you're paying a lot of money for them to show you how to flip houses. And I've never gone through the program, but I'll bet that there's a lot of unhappy people that have, because of the fact that, as I said before, you make your money when you buy the house. And that's really the most difficult part. That's why I stepped back from doing it, because it got to the point where I was not able to find houses that I thought were adequately priced. And so there just wasn't the inventory. And I would say now more than ever, there's even less inventory. So if we do have a pullback in the real estate market and you are sitting on a lot of cash that's not doing anything for you and you're a risk taker, then maybe you can take that opportunity if it does present itself to jump into this. But if not, you really want to be careful. You can finance it all yourself. You also can use something called a hard money lender. A hard money lender is an individual or group of people that will lend you the money that you need, the majority of the money that you need for the house. So most hard money lenders will lend you similar to a bank would, right? We talked about buying a rental property. They'll lend you like 80 to 90% of the cost to buy the property. Some of them will even lend you the repair costs as well, but they're charging you a significant amount of closing costs and also points or interest. So most of these hard money lenders will charge you anywhere from 10 to maybe 12% annual interest or more. That's why they're doing this. They're not doing it out of their goodness of their heart. Maybe they are good people, but they're doing this to make money. And they're also charging you points on the closing or acquisition cost of the property, anywhere from like 2 to 4 points. And 1 point, by the way, is 1% interest. So if they're charging you 4% on the closing costs and you're paying $300,000 for the property, that means you're paying $12,000 of closing costs on top of any other closing costs there are. If you hold this property for a whole year, you could be paying like 16% interest. Now, obviously, that interest continues to accrue. So if you're using a hard money lender, you want to turn this property over as quickly as possible to minimize the time that you're paying this interest, because that all eats into your profit. So you want to be careful if you end up using a hard money lender, really understanding what you're doing, because where you could go wrong is that you could lose the 10 or 20% that you had to put down if you don't sell the property in time and the hard money lender forecloses on you. Just like any other bank, they're going to keep that equity and they're going to probably turn around and complete the project or sell the house, and then they'll make the money. But there can be very large upside in this. Obviously, if you watch any of these flipping shows and if the numbers are anywhere close to being accurate, people do make money flipping houses, but it's something that, as I learned, I flipped almost 10 houses. You learn as you go, but the mistakes are costly, right? If you overpay, well, maybe you don't make any money on a flip. That really stinks. Or maybe you even lose money, and that really, really stinks. So just be careful with that. So this brings us to way number 5 to make money in real estate. And that would be using something called a real estate investment group. And I have to say that as I was researching this podcast, I came across this, and I've seen advertisements for some of these, heard them on the radio. I don't have any experience with these, so I can't really tell you how these work or work for people. But from what I read, essentially, they're ideal for people who want to get into real estate, but don't want the hassle of running it, or don't have the capital that's necessary. So let's just say you wanted to buy a rental property, but you don't have the ability to come up with the 30% that you need to buy the property. Well, for a lesser amount, you could buy into one of these real estate investment groups. And the real estate investment group, they are formed and they then go out and buy these properties in groups, and then they sell off pieces or parts of the properties. So depending on the ones that you get involved in, you then own a piece of one of these properties. And these are structured in either one of two ways. They're either structured as LLCs or corporations. And so that's one of the cons of these, is that if you compare this to a real estate investment trust, a real estate investment trust has much more regulation as far as how they have to be managed and how they're structured. These are a little more loose in their structuring. So there can be a lot of risk with these. So you need to do your research if you're going to get into these and really understand all of the costs that you're paying, because these do charge a cost, and real estate investment trusts, they can charge a fee as well. But if you're dealing with a low-cost index real estate investment trust, those fees are very low. And I would imagine that these real estate investment groups, their fees can be pretty high, because that's where people are doing these. They're doing it to make money. But the pros would be that if you're looking for exposure to real estate and you don't have a lot of money to get into it, maybe this is a way that you do that. And it can also give you a little more management, because I believe with these real estate investment groups, the properties are managed. So you're not dealing with the rental and the collection of rents and maintenance and such. And our 6th and final way to make money in real estate is using an online real estate platform. And this is a way that you can get exposure to real estate also at a lower level than flipping or buying a rental property, or even maybe using one of the real estate investment groups. And this is through a crowdfunding structure. And with crowdfunding, it is just like it sounds. A group of people are investing in something. So because a group of people are doing it, means less capital is required. And in the past, crowdfunding was really used just for equity investors, like very speculative stock investing for new companies that were being started or companies that were raising capital. And you had to be what was known as an accredited investor, which the definition has changed over the years. But what now that means that you're either a pension or institution or a bank, or if you're an individual, you have to have annual income of $200,000 or more, or have a net worth, excluding your primary residence, $1 million or more. If you didn't fall into that definition, then because of the Jobs Act that was passed a number of years ago, this crowdfunding is now available for other people. And with sometimes as low as $1,000, you can invest in these real estate investments. And however, there are requirements that if your income or your net worth is less than $107,000 in the last 12 months, then you can only invest up to $2,200, the greater of $2,200, or 5% of the lesser of your income or net worth. And then if your income is over $107,000, then you can invest up to 10% of the greater of your income or net worth, but not more than $107,000 total. So examples of some of these that are out there, like Prosper, Lending Club, and you're either lending money to individuals that are going to buy real estate or, buying into a piece of the real estate. But, some of the pros are that, yes, it's giving you better income or interest than you're getting at the bank, but your money's not very liquid because there's lockup periods and your money could be tied up for a number of years. There's also management fees. So you have to be careful with these. I honestly have no experience, so I can't really give you my own take on this, but I know that they're out there. So I hope that going over these 6 ways that you can make money in real estate has been helpful to you. Remember to tune in next week as we discuss investing in rental properties and how to analyze them. And over the next 3 weeks, we'll be continuing our discussion on real estate. Also, if you're enjoying this podcast, please pull out your iPhone, go to Apple Podcasts, search Retire with Ryan, leave me a 5-star review if you haven't already, and subscribe to get your weekly updates. Have a great week, and I look forward to talking to you next Wednesday.
You should consult a financial advisor familiar with your specific circumstances before you make any financial decisions. Nothing in this broadcast constitutes a solicitation for the sale or purchase of any securities. Any mention of rates of return are historical or hypothetical in nature and are not a guarantee of future returns. Ryan Morrissey, CFP, is an investment advisor representative of Morrissey Wealth Management, LLC, a registered investment advisor.